June 10. 312. Constantine the Great called the First Council of Nice to determine on the Arian heresy. 1190. Frederick I Barbarossa, Emperor of Germany, died in Syria, in consequence of bathing imprudently in the Cydnus. He was frequently engaged in quarrels with the popes, but was at last persuaded to turn his arms against the Saracens. He marched a numerous army into Asia and was victorious over all that opposed him. 1429. Battle of Jargeau. The place was carried by storm by the French, who were led on by Joan of Arc. On reaching the top of the wall she received a blow on the head, which precipitated her into the ditch. Being unable to rise, she continued to exhort her friends, assuring them that the Lord had delivered the English into their hands. 1530. The College of Bologna determined that the marriage law in the Book of Leviticus, being a part of the law of nations, as well as of the law of Moses and of God, is binding on the whole Christian Church, as well as infidels, and therefore gave their decision against the legality of Henry's marriage with Catherine of Aragon. 1584. Two barks fitted out by Raleigh, under the command of Barlow and Amy Dawes, arrived in the West Indies, upon a voyage of discovery. They returned to England, about the middle of September, having taken possession of a new country, which so pleased the Queen, Elizabeth, that she named it Virginia. 1593. Date of the Leghorn or Livorno Indulto, by which merchants of all nations and of every religion were invited to settle in the town. Many Jews from Spain availed themselves of this privilege. 1604. Isabella Andreini, a famous Italian actress, died. She distinguished herself equally as a poetess, and possessed, with great personal beauty, wit and genius, in a superior degree. 1610. The first Dutch emigrants to America landed at Manhattan, now New York. 1654. Alexandre Algardi, a Bologna sculptor, died. He was employed to restore the Garden of Sallust. Many of his original pieces have been engraved. 1667. The Dutch fleet, commanded by de Ruyter, sailed up the river Medway, in England, as far as Chatham, and destroyed several men of war. 1692. Bridget Bishop hanged at Salem, Massachusetts, for witchcraft. 1692. An army of French and Indians made a furious attack on the garrison at Wells, in Maine, commanded by Captain Wells, who, after a brave and resolute defense, drove them off with great loss. 1710. The German emigrants, who fled from the devastations committed in the Palatinate of the Rhine, by Louis XIV, arrived in New York. 1719. Battle of Glenshields in Scotland, which ended the Spanish invasion. 1724. A party of volunteers at Oyster River, in New Hampshire, discovered an Indian ambush, which they attacked, killed one, and wounded two others, who made their escape, though pursued and tracked by their blood to a considerable distance. The slain Indian was a person of distinction, and wore a kind of coronet of scarlet dyed fur, with an appendage of 4 small bells, by the sound of which the others might follow him through the thickets. His hair was remarkably soft and fine, and he had about him a devotional book and a muster roll of 180 Indians. His scalp produced a bounty. 1726. Anthony Alsop, an English prelate and poet, died. 1735. Thomas Hearne, an English antiquary, died. He edited nearly 40 works, some of them classics, but principally relative to ancient English history and antiquities. 1739. Grosvenor Square Centre house valued at £10,000, was raffled for and won by Mrs. Hunt, a grocer's wife in Piccadilly. 1761. Indian Battle. The Cherokees defeated by the British under Colonel Grant, and their town at Cho utterly destroyed, together with their magazines and cornfields. 1768. Riot in Boston, headed by Captain Malcolm, on account of the seizure of the sloop Liberty, belonging to Mr. Hancock, by the Commissioners of the King's Customs. 1772. The Gaspee, an armed British schooner, having exacted some degrading terms of the American vessels entering the port of Providence, a body of the inhabitants boarded her, put the officers and crew ashore, and burnt the vessel with all her stores. 1792. Russians attacked a detachment of Poles, under General Judicki, between Myr and Swierdza, but were defeated, with the loss of 500 dead on the field. 1798. Bonaparte attacked Valletta, in Malta, and in a sortie the Maltese lost the standard of their order. 1800. Battle of Montebello, in Italy, in which the Austrians were defeated, and compelled to retire to Vafira. 1801. The Pasha of Tripoli declared war against the United States of America. 1806. The British House of Lords resolved to abolish the slave trade. 1807. Battle of Heilsberg, in Prussia. The French, under Bonaparte, defeated the Russians, who fell back into their entrenchments. About 4,000 Russians were taken prisoners. Russell had his head carried off by a cannonball, and Murat had 2 horses shot under him. The Russians retreated the next night. 1809. Pope Pius VII excommunicated Bonaparte. 1811. Lord Wellington raised the siege of Badajoz. The French governor, Philippon, made a brave and noble defense. 1831. Francis Abbott, the hermit of Niagara Falls, drowned while bathing in the river. He was a native of England, of Quaker parentage. He arrived at the falls in June, 1829, on foot, in a very singular costume, and after a week's residence became so fascinated with the place that he determined on fixing his abode on Goat Island. He sought seclusion, and wished to erect a hut, but the proprietor not thinking proper to grant his request, he took a small room in the only house, where he was occasionally furnished with bread and milk by the family, but more generally providing, and always cooking his own food. In the second winter of his residence, the house changed tenants, at which he quitted the island and built himself a small cottage on the main shore, about 30 rods below the fall. He was a person of highly cultivated mind and manners, a master of languages, and deeply read in the arts and sciences, and performed on various musical instruments with great taste. His drawings were also very spirited. He had traveled over Europe, and parts of the East, and possessed great colloquial powers when inclined to be sociable. On entering his hut, his guitar, violin, flutes, music books and portfolio were scattered round in profusion, but not a single written paper of any kind was found. To throw the least light on this extraordinary character. 1831. General Dietrich, commander of the Russian forces in Poland, died, by the official accounts, of cholera. It is supposed by poison. 1836. Jean-Marie Ampère, famed as a mathematician and natural philosopher, died. Near the close of his life he busied himself with a classification of the sciences, a work from which great minds before him had shrunk. 1837. The plague at Smyrna committed great ravages. About 300 died daily for some time. 1839. John Ridge, a Cherokee, murdered. He was educated at the Cornwall School in Connecticut, where he married a respectable white woman. He was a practicing attorney among the Cherokees, and a man of talents. 1851. Robert Dundas, Viscount Melville, British statesman, died, aged 80. He was for many years in the ministry, especially as First Lord of the Admiralty. 1854. The Crystal Palace at Sydenham, England, was opened by the Queen, Victoria. 40,000 persons being present.